University of Tennessee asked for donations after fans ripped down their goalposts. The Green Bay Packer fans are definitely spoiled, and I'm going to give my 2 cents on how fucked this teenage generation of girls are, and I am not going to be nice. All right, let's get into it.
Ready, set, podcast.
All right, welcome to the ever-evolving, never-ending Ready Said podcast. Let's get some announcements out of the way. Please go to Facebook and like our Facebook page. If you have any comments or thoughts you'd like to share, please leave them on the page and let me know. If you would like to like this video, that would be very much appreciated. If you would subscribe to the YouTube page, we got a lot of ninja watchers out there, and there's nothing wrong with that. But hey, just give good old Joe a little of subscriber-oo. Why don't you? And if we're on Spotify, iHeartRadio, wherever you may find your podcast, Apple Podcasts, definitely not on Mixcloud. I think I love reminding everyone of that. And I don't even know who uses Mixcloud, let alone SoundCloud. I think I started using them and I just dumped SoundCloud. Actually, they probably dumped me because I was trying to use the free stuff and I'm like, fuck you guys, don't need you bitches. Anyway. That should be it for the announcements. Just give the video a like, subscribe. Don't really ask you to donate or do anything. Just get the podcast out there would be very appreciated. Sharing it with your friends on social media. Okay, so our first story is it's about a month old, but it just caught my attention and I just wanted to kind of talk about it. And this was about the University of Tennessee asking their fans for donations after they ripped down the goalpost after they beat Alabama again about a month ago. And, just going through here, this private foundation at University of Tennessee created a webpage where anyone can give up to 2,100 people so far have donated, which those people need to be, I don't even understand why they're donating, and we'll get into that in a second. But as of Monday, and this was again about a month ago, it says it raised roughly $83,000 out of a target amount of $150,000. And I listen to this spin here. We thought this was a fun way to invite Vol Nation to continue in the celebration of giving their money. What? UT Athletic Director Danny White said in a statement with his hands held out like that in the tin cup. We had heard before during the game that the fans would, let me get this ad out of here, would celebrate, that the fans would support a celebration no matter the cost. So we leaned into the enthusiasm. Goalposts cost between $10,000 and $20,000 each, excluding installation costs. Okay, so they got the goalpost paid for at least 4 times over right now because they said they they raised roughly $83,000 out of a target amount of $150,000. So you're probably asking yourself, well, what's that $100,000 for? Well, that's going to come right down here. So apparently, they lost to Alabama, etc. a bunch of times. It was the first time they beat them. The school has been fined $100,000 by the Southeastern Conference for allowing fans to run onto the field. CBS Sports reported it's the second offense for UT. Students also ran onto the basketball court in 2006 after a victory over the University of Florida. A third such penalty would cost $250,000, according to SEC rules. So, you have a 4-year school that is basically propped up by the government through taxpayer-backed loans, asking these very same people for money. I mean, this is like the rich kid down the block standing at the corner asking people to pay for his Jordans that he's going to buy for himself. Like, that is nuts. Let's get into the numbers here. In 2021, the UT Athletics Department generated $133 million in revenue, with football accounting for basically a little less than half of all of that money, according to financial data from the university. The university submitted to the NCAA. This past weekend marked the first time UT had its goalposts torn down since 1998 when the Volunteers, I believe Peyton Manning was a quarterback for that team, upset the University of Florida. After that incident, the Tennessee school bought backup goalposts and will use them now to replace the goalposts torn down last weekend. Money generated from the fundraising campaign will pay for the new replacement goalposts, whatever that guy's name said. Let's talk about how ridiculous that is. You make all that money, $62 million a year for the athletic department. And again, that divides down between all the different athletics, but we're talking about millions of dollars. And I guarantee you the football program gets the majority of that share because they're the ones, that $62 million is the football program. And they're asking people to cough up 30 grand for the goalpost and 100 grand for that fine. Like, can you imagine if the Chicago Bears or the Green Bay Packers or even the Detroit Lions? Well, I mean, that's a fantasy for the Lions and the Bears too. So we'll use the Packers. Let's say the Packers fans, won the next 10 straight and they decide to storm the field and rip down the goalpost. Now, first of all, most of them would be arrested or, however they would handle that situation, but they would be somewhat considered, it wouldn't be good, but let's ignore that. Let's just say these fans rip down the goalpost. Can you imagine if the NFL fined the Packers and then the Packers turned around and said, hey, we make millions, but can you guys, donate to us so we can pay for that? What? Like how fucking disconnected are you from society where you think it's okay to take people who are probably paying you, up to $30K a year, or even worse, who are alumni from this university who had paid the tuition, have been continuously donating, and now they're asking you to donate even more. And then the fun spin on it is it's all for fun, man. Yeah, we're not greedy. We're not, a taxpayer-based, whatever. I mean, we're rich. We can afford it, but we're just going to ask you. It's fucking nuts. Okay, so speaking of the Bears and the Packers, I think the last time I talked about it, I was just trying to figure out, why things are the way they are. The Bears, trying to solve this Green Bay Packers Bears riddle, and every week it just gets more head scratching. I mean, we all know the Bears suck. Like, they have not won. I can't even remember the last time they won. The last, I think the Miami game was determined by a pass interference call. They blew the Detroit game, and the last two, they just. The defense just can't stop anyone. It's just that simple. And the Packers just seem to be going in that same direction. But then, well, here, let's look at, let me bring this up here. So we got the standings, look at the NFC. Yeah, there we go. Okay, so we'll go back to here. Okay, so we have the Packers at 4-7, and the Bears at 3-8. So you think, and the only difference in that one game is then the Packers beat the Dallas Cowboys. And what I find is so interesting about that is we're back, baby. We're back. I even have someone I follow on Instagram who was very quiet about the Packers, said nothing about them. They win this Dallas game. All of a sudden on Monday, she's, Instagram stories, Packers are so amazing. And then they get crushed on Thursday by the fucking Titans. And she thinks she, again, posted something again. I was like, I still love my Packers. You're a fucking moron. That's all I got to say to that. Quit posting about the Packers and just keep posting about your OnlyFans and asking weirdos to give you anonymous messages and then castigating them for it when they give you a weird one. Like, give me a fucking break, lady. Just whatever, Excuse me. So yeah, I just can't solve this riddle about the Packers. And what's kind of hilarious to me is watching their fan base just react to this horrible team. I mean, I'm used to this kind of crap for the Bears. Like, the Bears are just so bad. This is just pretty par for the course. But the Green Bay Packer fans, they're not used to kind of wadding these waters, if you will. And there is a person who spots like this that no better, the Colin Cowherd. And let's just go to what he has to say here.
Fans are spoiled brats. In 26 of the last 30 years, the Packers have been 500 or better. That's insane.
I have a theory.
I screwed up.
Spoiled brats. In 26 of the last 30 years, the Packers have been 500 or better. That's insane. That's insane. In a league where half the playoff teams, do not make the playoffs the following year. 26 of 30 years, the Packer fans have made the playoffs. And these brats go to their social media feeds and Reddit boards, and they want the general manager fired. Folks, this wasn't a hard
Or Aaron benched.
Devontae Adams left. The Vikings got better. The Vikings switched to an offensive coach. Packer fans are spoiled brats.
Yeah, I mean, he said it all right there. I mean, the Packer fans aren't used to this. You're seeing this in the media. I mean, there are some publications asking for Aaron Rodgers to be benched so they could play Jordan Love. I mean, and I mean, Rodgers plays good. So when I see people saying that, like, oh, they need to bench Rodgers. We need to see what Love looks like. Like, excuse me if I think your political motivations might be playing into that bias there, because Jordan Love does not look good, and you're also paying Aaron Rodgers a lot of money, so he should be playing regardless. And again, as Colin said it, you traded Devontae and paid Rodgers, and look at what you got. You know what I mean? Like, you get what you pay for, I guess. When you invest into a middle-aged quarterback, that's what you're going to get. And we Colin has been he hasn't been shy about what he thinks about Aaron Rodgers, and I have my biases against him, but I can obviously say, even as a Bears fan, the guy has a great arm. He's extremely accurate, but obviously the peripherals of his attitude, you can see in the way he treats people, and just how he responds to people, it kind of, I think, works against him in the long run. But it's very, very comical to see the Packers in this position. It was even more fun I love watching them. They're a fun team to watch. That Dallas game was really good. But just the hype that was behind them after winning. Oh, we're back, baby. We're back. No, you're not. You're not back at all. So originally when I wrote out this segment, I wanted to kind of do this like, who's gonna win the NFC North? Is it going to be the Vikings? Maybe the Packers? I mean, you have the Lions kind of, they're on a little bit of a win streak. I don't know if they won on Sunday or Thursday. Maybe they played the Bills. They definitely lost. So they that kind of came to an end. But they're I think they're second place right now over the Bears and the Packers. And again, that's not a position the Packers are used to being in. And it's, I'm loving it. But I just can't I just keep laughing at the fact that they beat Dallas. And everyone's like, we're back, baby. And then you got smoked they didn't get smoked. They still lost to the Titans. And it's just, this is obvious. This team's got problems. You know what I mean? And you can blame it all you want on Rodgers and, call him names and say this, that, the other. But it's obviously a personnel problem. And I think investing all that money into Aaron Rodgers was a huge, giant mistake. So originally, like I said, I wanted to have NFC North predictions, but obviously the Vikings are going to win this. They're going to definitely take the NFC North. Let's see. Actually, let me give you who else I think. So let's do the NFC this week, and then maybe I'll do the AFC next week. But so far, yeah, I think you got the Eagles and Dallas coming out of the NFC East. I guess the Eagles are going to win that. Man, the NFC East is stacked. Woo! You got all these teams are basically. Wow, that's pretty good. You might have 3 teams coming out of the NFC East going into the playoffs. Playoffs. Yeah, the NFC North, obviously, that's going to be the Vikings. I don't really see Detroit coming back. There's no way. I mean, they have a point differential of -35. I mean, that's worse than the Bears, and they still have a better record, which is probably more a testament to the Bears' lack of defense. The NFC South kind of reminds me of I guess we'll switch over to the article view. NFC South reminds me of the old NFC West from like 12, 11 years ago. We get Tampa 5-5, Atlanta 5-6. Yeah, that's going to be an interesting one too. You're probably only get out of the NFC North and the NFC South, you're probably only get one team coming out of there. Yeah, probably say, wow, so that's how bad the other 3 divisions are. You're going to get a division winner out of those, and then the rest of them maybe you'll get 2, but the majority of these playoff teams are going to come out of the NFC East, and then division winners. So yeah, for the West, whoa, excuse me, that is a tough one. Seahawks don't look that great. I guess at this point you're going to have San Francisco, probably Tampa. The Falcons don't look that great. Vikings, and then, these 3 teams will probably be going, yeah, that's probably what we're looking at. That's interesting stuff. But, Bears, they're pretty fucking bad. I mean, the NFL, speaking of the NFL, I remember the days when I used to walk to school about a few miles in the snow. No, that's not true. Even about 15, 16 years ago, the NFL had really good parity. I mean, this standings that we were looking at, that did not exist. There were many, many times that, some of these divisions, they were pretty tight, at least through the first 8 weeks. Now, it makes you wonder, back then, this is before there was a big change in the NFL with that lockdown that they had in 2010, 2011, because one of the biggest changes they had in it was they reduced practice times. And then even more recent, they have reduced the preseason almost down to nothing. And it makes you wonder, because back when the NFL had a lot of parity, these guys were going to training camps. They were practicing a lot more. They weren't the the NFL wasn't regulating teams on how many hard-hitting practices they could have. I mean, after that lockout, they really limited how many teams or how many of those hard-hitting practices they could have. And I think the league over the last 10 years or so, you're seeing that now because there's no more parity in the league, and a lot of teams now, because they don't have a preseason, they don't even play their starters. They don't really, and I agree with that, but the game is suffering because nothing really starts happening. Some teams aren't really even clicking till, week 5 or 6. So the product on the field is definitely suffering a little bit from this recent, from these last 2 moves, going back to lockdown and reducing the preseason to whatever the hell it is now. I don't even know. I don't even watch it anymore. I mean, again, that's a good thing. But again, whenever you create a policy, for good or bad, there's going to be a knee-jerk reaction to whatever you're doing in either direction. Sometimes both, for politics, sports, and everything. Yes, you're reducing all of the, you're reducing injuries, you're reducing practices where that can create injuries or prolong injuries even. Now you've taken the preseason and turned it into a 4-week thing, into whatever the fuck it is now, 2 weeks, I think, and nobody watches it, and now the product on the field is suffering, and it is what it is. The NFL makes $19-20 billion. It's probably more than that now, but it's something in that range, and it's just, it's fucking crazy. But, I would like to see the league have more parity, and again, with the way things are currently, I have no idea how they plan on achieving this. Okay, so let's move on to our last story here. Look at that. We are at minute 16, and we are basically done. We're getting there, folks. Really quickly, I want to say that there's been some rustling going on. I'm not sure what's going on. It's been kind of bugging me. I feel like I'm being spied on a little bit. Yeah, I feel like there's some kind of like rustling in the bushes going on. What is that?
And that's Ready Set Podcast on Twitter in care of Joe Persinger at 420 Chicago Avenue.
Oh, Ken. He always likes to make his appearance. Like, he's somewhere in those bushes. Where are you, Ken? That's Ken for you. Okay, so let's get to this last story here. This is probably not going to be not everyone's favorite, as they say. How should I do this? All right, let's do this way. I sometimes I go on Twitter and I like to rant, and I kind of did that last time with about breaking points. But kind of watching it back, it didn't read right, like reading along with it. So I'm gonna kind of do my monologue based on some of these Twitter rants I've gone on. So if you ever want to like read these things, they are on Twitter. This one specifically is dated November 5th, 2021, and I really hope to God this video is able to stay on YouTube after the fact. Okay, so let's get to this here. So let me preface this way. It's no secret that this current generation of young women who are basically have been born since 2000, at a bare minimum, because if you've been born, 22 years ago, by the time you were 5, 6, 7, so born in those first few years of the century, by the time you were 7 or 8, the iPhone had been created. Now, were parents giving kids phones at the time? Like, not all, back then iPhones were expensive. So chances are if you had an iPhone as a kid that age, which I don't think kids did, it, I think, became more common as the years went by. But the point is, you have this generation of young women and boys, mainly talking about the young women today, that have been growing up on social media and, it basically in a market where everything is globalized now, meaning like when I was a kid, if I, made a video, the only people I was going to be able to show it to were my close-knit circle of friends or whoever was at my house or who was ever let me crazy enough to put a videotape in their VCR, which there weren't too many of those people, rightfully so. So nowadays you have these kids that they're given these devices and they're immediately just they're given so much information. I mean, porn is a perfect example of it. Again, this is more on the boys' side because obviously that's where I'm at. I'm not a chick, if that's not obvious. But, when we were kids, if we wanted to, this reminds me of the Sandlot days, as I like to say from a few episodes ago. Like, okay, here's a perfect example. I'll use two stories. One, an unnamed friend, and then me. Summer of '97, a friend of mine, Pickle, he was on that number. Oh, I forgot which numbered episode it was, but B-Dub Pickle. We talked about the corona. I think the coronavirus, the pandemic was happening, and we had a discussion about that. When he was living in Arizona, he would come out to visit over the summer, and this was summer of '96, and he was he still had a house in the neighborhood, so they lived in Arizona, and then they'd come out for the summer. So he was still kind of like a part-time crew member because he was still there during the summer. So this one summer, we were kids, we were 14, we didn't have phones, we didn't have social media, we were told to go outside and fuck off. Well, I think this day there happened to be nobody at our friend's house. I gotta be very careful not to name this gentleman. And we were at his house, and I think we were just sitting around, and then all of a sudden, this person emerges from his parents' closet with a VHS tape, and he's like, "You guys are gonna have to check this thing out." And it was porn, you know what I mean? And again, we sat around and watched it because that was how you were going to do it, I could even fast forward to a few years from then, and I think we were all renting a hotel, and people started buying porn, and it was just, you just didn't talk about it. It's kind of one of those things. Anyway, going back to 1990, I think this is summer '96, watching this thing was straight out of the 80s. I remember there was at one point in this porn where you could hear the director calling out directions to the actors, and I specifically remember them doing a scene where it was reverse cowgirl. Oh, God, I hope my mom's not watching this. So sorry, Mom. She already told me I swear too much on this thing, so I already toned that down. This I apologize for, and because your ex-husband's on the next story too, so you might want to fast forward a little bit here. So we start watching this thing, and I remember you could hear the director, they're in the reverse cowgirl position, and you can hear him say, "All right, Jim, now just reach up and cup her breast." And my Pickle loved that line. For some reason, watching him laugh was seared into my brain. Again, this is what teenagers do, and I don't know why I'm still rambling about it, but I am. But we're still somewhat under time, and I could make 30 minutes. So the other story was, I think this was the next summer. Yeah, so the '96 that's right. It was called The Beast Women. And I remember the fucking movie ended where this guy was just banging this lady, dressed like in some kind of costume, I think, if I'm remembering correctly. And then at the end of it, he does his thing, and he goes, "Aren't you one of the Beast Women?" And she's like, "Uh-huh." And I think that was like a running line joke in our group for the rest of that summer. "Aren't you one of the Beast Women?" "Uh-huh. Uh-huh." Anyway, so that next summer, Brandon, they had sold his house, and now he was staying with me, my mom, and my stepdad, which is technically in the same neighborhood, but we won't even get into that. So when he was staying, I think I was doing summer school that year, and oh my God, I remember that was summers I had to do. I think I was only doing one class, health class, and it was the early one because I remember being out of there it was 2 hours, and I was usually out of there by like 11 o'clock. But asking me to be up at like 8 o'clock to get ready for school, you gotta remember back then, like at 8, I had to be up at like 8. It took me 8:15 or so, and I think it took me about 10-15 minutes to walk over to the school. Yeah, I walked, baby, nothing but walking, and it was really hard to get up and get there, especially if I didn't have a ride in the morning. But I remember the second hour of class was we would just watch videos, and I would sleep through that second hour. So anyway, I come home from school that one day, and I think my parents were working, and Brandon clearly was snooping around the house because he goes, "Guess what I just found in your stepdad's dresser?" And it was, I'll never forget this, it was a VHS tape called Swedish Hardcore Erotica, and this one was even older than the one we had watched the year prior. This one was straight out of the 60s, and this was jarring because you got to remember, I just came from a summer school health class where they and I had been in health class, which from your time you're 12 to that, I think I was 15 back then. They were promoting safe sex and all that. They wanted kids to have an awareness about it. So we're watching this porn, and this guy, the one I think I remember us watching, I can't believe I strayed into this, but anyway, the one that I remember us watching, it was this guy who comes back from college, big white Jew fro looking dude, and he brings his girlfriend, and she meets the mom and the aunt, and of course he ends up banging the mom and the aunt before the girl comes in, and it turns into a threesome. And again, what was jarring is being in health class and all that was no condoms, and this guy was just busting in chicks left and right. Like, it was just like, that was a bit of a culture shock. But hey, it was the 60s. That's why the 60s were the 60s. If you watch Forrest Gump, you know what I'm talking about. So anyway, these were the things that we'd have to do to watch these things. I remember specifically with that my stepdad. He didn't like his stuff being fucked with. One time I threw the remote on the couch just as like a, walking away throwing it. I was grounded for a while. So I knew if this tape was fucked with, there was going to be some hell to pay. And my parents love to put restrictions on my freedom, which is probably why I lean so against authority in general, but that's a whole nother thing. So we would have to rewind this tape to the exact same moment it was on. And, I mean, there was some give and take, obviously, with VHS players. When you pop the tape in, it would kind of adjust the starting point. But as long as it was somewhat there, you were good. And these are things kids don't have to deal with today. Now, specifically teenage women, teenage girls, these plights, I don't know. But from what I understand, from what I hear, I mean, Joe Rogan has done a podcast about this, or a few, I would even say, that obviously they struggle with the way they look. And this was even a thing when I was in school, that I remember them saying I remember the specific one thing I would see it would be like a picture of a girl looking into a mirror, and she looked average, but there was nothing wrong with her. She didn't have like a goiter, she wasn't fat, she wasn't like a pear, she's just a normal looking girl. And then looking back in the mirror, she looked like a monster to herself, or she looked fat. There's many variations of this meme. So but that was essentially what it was saying is, people have their own, like, they distort how they look in reality to themselves. Okay, that's fine. And that was kind of the message back then. And now, obviously, it's been completely thrown upside down on its head because these girls have access to, this global market. They have access to each other. When I was like 15, that was kind of when social media was becoming a thing, you know what I mean? It was still new, and no one really knew what it was and how it was going to affect kids. But I remember being on the frontier of cyberbullying, and I'm sure I was talking shit online, and then I got back to someone, and then they started messaging me and just saying a bunch of horrendous shit. I could name the person, but I won't. I've moved on with my life, at least. And yeah, so I can kind of get an idea of what people are dealing with. But this is late 90s, okay? Like, if I wanted to go online, I had to go into my room or into a computer room, sit down and sign on. It didn't follow me around. It didn't follow me around. Like, I didn't have access to information or a computer at all times of the day like these kids do. And what we're seeing, as I'm going to move over here to the monologue, is a lot of these girls, they struggle with this. And this is probably the part of the podcast where you're like, oh, Joe's going to, say some nice and uplifting things, and it's definitely not where this is going. So I'm warning you right now, if you don't want to get offended, I would turn the podcast off, which I'm sure most of you already have done by now. Anyway, so let's start here. So this young generation of girls, they're fucked. It's just that simple. I've seen countless overgrown teenagers with perfectly great-looking bodies sacrificed because they don't want to look like they don't want to look like a lollipop.
Not that there's anything wrong with that.
No, not at all. Not at all. So this has to, now having said that, I should have queued that one up too. Having said that, these are the same girls who end up banging so many dudes. They always settle for less than what they actually deserve. And it's not because, the choice they've made is to improve themselves. It's this toxic attitude towards themselves that permeates in their brains. And this toxic attitude puts them in this box where, they want to add every hot guy to their body count, or, they try to hook up and date and change, the bad boy, or date the fuck boy, or worse than them all, dates the guy who cheated on his girlfriend with her. Think about that. It kind of alludes to, there's a form of delusion with some women where they think like, oh, he cheated on his girlfriend with me, well, he's not going to do that with me. Like what world are you living in here? So this mindset, this attitude, this leads to this long road of constantly being cheated on, being bitter, and being incapable of trusting anyone. And through this whole time, it has them questioning that, questioning why are all men so bad? Why are they constantly cheating on me? Well, at the same time, constantly chasing this same type of man and repeating this process over and over until she finds basically someone that's dumb enough to put up with her. But that'll only last a few years, maybe 5 at best, and then this process will repeat over and over because, again, girls get bored. If you're with a girl and you happen to, put up with her crap and, she stays along, I mean, you're going to hit a breaking point at a certain, eventually. And usually the cycle is, and again, it's an arbitrary number, but, the point is that cycle is going to repeat itself over and over and over, and delusion might be a part of that process. And this has nothing to do with me, but seeing numerous people turn into these rail thin lollipops on Instagram or TikTok because they think that's what men want is just laughable, and they deserve every cat they adopt from here on out. And I mean that. And don't get me wrong, everyone looks great. I'm not denying that, but if you want the right guy, just go talk to him. He's a guy. Depending on which guy he is, he's happy you're just even paying attention to him because we know most men, they're invisible to women. So why don't you just reach out, pay attention to him, and just let him know? But you know what? That's probably not what is going to happen. And, there's another thing about these girls this age is there's this epidemic with women, at least in, their early 20s, where they're just hacking their tits off for no reason. And I don't understand why. As a man who, I would say a connoisseur a connoisseur of big breasts, hacking your tits off and expecting the same amount of engagement that you were getting before is the definition of being delusional. And I don't understand it. There's definitely something going on where women feel like they need to look like a model out of, the 90s, this tall, thin rail looking lollipop, because that's what they all look like now. They just look like lollipops. Why do I want someone with a big head and this skinny? It makes no sense. Nobody wants that. That's just what women think men want. Do you know what kind of men want that? The guys that are going to cheat on you. That's who. And again, I'm in a relationship. I've been in one for a really long time. This isn't me trying to get back at someone, ambiguously. I'm just saying these are the things I see. And it's maddening. You know what I mean? Like, you have a great body. You look good. You probably have a great personality. But when it comes to social media, TikTok, Instagram, I have some bad news for you. Nobody's tuning in to hear about your cooking tips. Nobody's tuning in to see what you're up to on spring break. Nobody's tuning in to hear what you have to say about whatever. They just want to get a good look at those nice big cans.
And that's Ready Set Podcast on Twitter in care of Joe Persinger at 420 Chicago Avenue.
All right, folks, we'll see you next week. Thanks for tuning in. Definitely tried to keep it under 40 minutes for you. The goal is under 30, but we're going to get there slowly, I promise. I kind of skipped this in the beginning. It's probably like the worst time to do this, but hey, if you're still here, I appreciate it. Thank you so much. Please like the Facebook page, like this video, subscribe to our YouTube page. We got a lot of you ninja watchers out there. There's nothing wrong with that, but please give old Joe a nice subscribe-o. There's nothing wrong with that, right? And if you want to check the podcast out, we are definitely audio only on Spotify, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, or wherever you may find your podcast. Definitely not Mixcloud. All right, this is your one-stop shop current events and politics podcast. If society's a joke, then we're just here for the first set. See you later, you fucks.